Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Racing Show here at RacePlazaMedia. My name is Pia, and today we're going to do a weekend recap of MotoGP. The boys were racing in Italy at the Misano World Circuit for the San Marino Grand Prix, and it was a fun race weekend with some surprises on race day. So for that, I have my top 5 highlights of this weekend's MotoGP races. And with much further ado, let's just get right into it. First off, I wanted to talk about the sprint race this weekend, just briefly touch on it, but especially I wanted to give a shout out to Frankie Morbidelli for making it on the podium. It was so nice to see him up there. He was very excited, but he also seemed very cool, calm, and collected being on the podium, but it was just nice to see him there. Of course, this weekend's eyes were on the 2 championship contenders, Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin, and they were battling it out in the sprint race as well. However, Pecco made some safer choices to earn some more points because, of course, he was behind Jorge Martin by quite a lot of points since he had crashed out the previous weekend with Alex Marquez. Pecco also said that he was still experiencing some pain, but he doesn't believe it would impact his riding, or he would just not let it impact his riding, which I think is a fair point. But as mentioned, my overall highlight for the sprint race was definitely Frankie Morbidelli, and I was going to look forward to seeing him in the feature race. Unfortunately, both VR46 race team riders crashed out during the race. Besecchi crashed out pretty late, if I remember correctly, which was a bummer to see because he actually had a pretty decent race. And of course, being at home in Italy, it's just a bummer when both Italian riders crash out at home. Of course, we have a couple other Italian riders on the grid that did well. I mean, Pecco Bagnaia came in second, and Enea Bastianini came in 4th in the sprint race. So at least there was that. But of course, anybody who's riding a home race wants to at least complete the race, but also do well at home. Highlight number 2. This one also includes Frankie Morbidelli because he and Pecco Acosta had quite some battling early on in the feature race on Sunday. So going into the race, there was some overcast happening on the track, so it looked very gray. Potential maybe light rain anticipated, but nothing major. So I was very curious going into that race. And then, the first couple of laps, Pedro Acosta and Frankie Morbidelli had some kerfuffle happening. Pedro Acosta lost part of his front wing, but both of them made it through that incident safely. However, unfortunately, both of the riders crashed out later on in the race, but Pedro Acosta was able to get back on the bike and rejoin the race. However, Frankie Morbidelli was out of the main race. Highlight number 3, and this is probably one of the most talked about points of the race because it was a big disaster. I mean, I put it on the thumbnail because I think it really was a disaster. Like I said in the forecast, or we were anticipating maybe some light rain, which of course impacts the track. And we saw in around lap 8, Jorge Martin was going wide. He had some trouble with grip. He was even raising his arm, trying to get the attention, presumably from the stewards. Maybe they should do something about the race, or maybe he was trying to communicate with his team. And then that lap, going into the next lap, he went into the pits, he switched his bike, and everybody was like, what is he doing? Because he looked around and he saw nobody from the front went in to switch his bike. He was the only one. After him, there was a couple other drivers. I think it was about a handful of riders that also went in to swap the bike. However, it was the wrong decision because it really just sprinkled for a couple minutes. There was sections of the track which were very, very slippery. You had to be careful about on the painted parts of the track as well. However, it was the wrong call. Not only did he miss or lose time because he had to go swap the bike once, but then he had to go switch the bike once again because he was losing 8 seconds per lap. It always boggles my mind how the tires can make this huge impact on your lap time because 8 seconds is huge, guys. So of course, this hurt Jorge Martin's race big time. So he started on 4th for the feature race. He ended up 15th. He barely ended up getting 1 point because the last couple of laps of the race, he was fighting a little bit with Maverick Vinales. However, he was able to keep his 15th position. He's gained 1 point. However, Pecco Bagnaia, because he came in second, spoiler, he ended up making a lot of points up that he had lost in the previous race with the incident with Alex Marquez. I mean, going into this weekend, I did not expect it. I expected it to be very close for the remainder of the championship. Them, Pecco and Jorge being 1 and 2 quite frequently, unless a big incident happened, and then it happened at the San Marino Grand Prix. I mean, me personally, this is my first season of MotoGP, so I'd never had a race this season, or haven't had a race this season yet, where the riders actually changed the bikes for weather conditions. So it was really interesting to see that one happen, but also the impact, of course, if you make a wrong call. And Jorge Martin has been making excellent calls for most of the season. However, this one definitely hurt him. Highlight number 4. So before we go into the podium and reveal, if you don't know yet, who won the race and the overall podium and driver standings, I just wanted to bring up what I noticed in the post-race interviews. I thought it was quite interesting to see how physically exhausted the riders were after this specific race at the San Marino Grand Prix. Yes, of course, I mean, they're always exhausted. There's a big physical toll that, of course, riding takes on them. They're athletes. They have to do a lot during those laps of racing. However, this time it's the most exhausted that I've seen a lot of the riders for this season so far. I am assuming, and you guys can chime in the comments below, of course, that it's also, of course, due to the conditions. The conditions were quite slippery. They were quite varying throughout the track. Different corners had different types of conditions. So you had to always, of course, be at 1,000% focus, be very minuscule about your movements and figure out how to move the bike so you can stay on the bike. Because of course, as per usual, we saw a lot of people wobbling. We didn't have as many crash outs as I would have anticipated with a race with mixed conditions like this, but it was still very interesting. I mean, I used to ride a motorcycle. I had a Suzuki Boulevard, and I rarely took it out, or not purposely took it out whenever it rained, because it was just too dangerous. So them riding at the speeds that they do, not that it is a comparison at all, but like I have this mini little inkling of what they're going through. So seeing them at the end of the race, their exhaustion, physical and mental exhaustion. I mean, Marc Marquez lost his footing during the post-race interview. I mean, you could just tell it in everybody's demeanor. So I thought that was also quite interesting to me. So highlight number 5, let's talk about the podium for the feature race at the San Marino Grand Prix. It definitely didn't end the way I expected. Of course, one reason is that big bike swap fiasco that happened earlier on in the race, and the mixed conditions helped, of course, Marc Marquez, because notoriously he is known to be really good in those mixed conditions, and he really took advantage of it. During the time where the bike swaps were happening, there was a lot of kerfuffle, a lot of mix and mingling on the grid happening, and he took over several people within a lap, and it was just really fun to see because the riders were quite close together at that point, and he passed them. Like, it took, I think it was like 3 corners, and then he had 5 people overtaken, which was incredible to see. It happened so fast with everything else going on the track, and then he led the race, and he didn't just lead it like by a little bit. Pecco Bagnaia was behind him. At first I was thinking, oh, maybe there was going to be a little bit of a fight, but then again, Pecco needs to be smart. This is his chance to really make up a lot of points on Jorge Martin, since we know he would make maybe 1 or 2 points, if at all, after the bike swap. This was his chance to earn 10 plus, 15 plus points on Jorge Martin. So the question was, is Pecco gonna risk it? Does he want to force the win? But then again, you have Marc Marquez there currently in first position, and you know he's not easy to overtake. He will fight for it. So are you gonna risk potentially crashing out again? So Pecco went the safer route. He also said that Marc Marquez just had the better pace. He was just better in those conditions, so that Marc Marquez ended up leading or winning by over 3 second. So we have first Marc Marquez, second we have Pecco Bagnaia, and then third Enea Bastianini. There was lots of talk about him this week, and his practice sessions weren't quite as good, but we know Enea has great late race pace, and he really showed that. He proved that. He ended up making up several positions, and he came in third, which was nice to see that we had at least 2 Italians on the podium. Then we had Binder in 4th, and then Bezzecchi came in 5th. So I was really happy to see Bezzecchi also in the top 5, especially after crashing out the day before for the sprint, to see at least one of the VR guys closer to the top while racing at home. Overall, it was definitely an exciting race with some unexpected drama pretty early on. It was, of course, nice to see Marc Marquez taking a second win back-to-back, and which I also loved seeing was that Gresini was wearing their vintage livery again. I think it's a beautiful livery with the white bike, with the Italian colors on it, of course, with the white and blue outfit. I think it's a great look. I think it's probably even better than their regular outfit, but that's just me personally. I love the vintage look of that and the colorway of it. Overall, I think it was a really fun race. It was very unexpected drama happening, but that makes the driver championship now all the more interesting, or rider championship all the more interesting, because Jorge Martin is still first. However, now Pecco Bagnaia is only 7 points away from Jorge Martin. So it's much closer. There's less error of margin for Jorge as well as Pecco, because we do have several races still left in the season, but truly every point counts. And currently still in third for the Rider Championship is Marc Marquez. He, of course, made up some additional points right there. But now that he's less than 50 points away from Pecco, I've been hearing some chatter in the comments on the socials that maybe, just maybe, he also has a chance to take the Rider Championship. I think a lot will need to happen for him to be able to take it. I'm really glad to see him rise up a little bit more during the second half of the MotoGP season. I think, yeah, it will take a lot for him to actually win it, but I'm excited that he's more in the mix of it now. I'm very much looking forward to the battle between Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia moving forward. We have our next race in 2 weeks. They're back in Italy, so it's going to be fun to see another round of racing. So we have a week off, we have a little bit of time to relax, but also we don't have time to relax because of course there's lots of racing happening in September. We're still in the middle of the racing season. After that, October, November, of course, things are going to die down. So let's enjoy it while we still have a lot of racing. But for all the details about the racing that you can watch this upcoming weekend, check out our video coming out on Thursday telling you what you can watch. If you don't want to wait until Thursday, check out our free racing calendar on our website, RacePlazaMedia.com, where you can find everything in terms of racing for the month of September, including links to the series, as well as links to different streaming options. And with that, I will leave you guys for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys here again at the Daily Racing Show. Bye-bye.